first of all, I'm honored to be asked to sort of be a part of this in this first annual, hopefully annual HOPEfest. Want to congratulate Jamie. You've done a wonderful job putting this together. I know you're having a little bit of stress right now with technical difficulties, but we'll get through that. And you've got a good lineup of speakers, and this is going to be great. There's going to be a lot of good information shared. So all you guys out there watching, this is going to be super duper good stuff. And Jamie's put together a wonderful lineup. Also want to thank Jim with FECO Playbook, Jim Gershner. All this would not be possible without Jim. And Jim if you have cancer, Jim is helping you, whether you know it or not, which is a marvelous and wonderful and beautiful thing. Okay, so to start this off, we're going to talk to you guys about the endocannabinoid system and its importance. We'll tie this into cancer at the very, very end. But it's super important to understand kind of the underlying principles here that I want to walk you guys through. And then I'll walk you through kind of what the endocannabinoid system is and what it does. But you kind of have to understand the big picture before you understand the endocannabinoid system in the big picture. So first of all, I want to talk to you guys a little bit about just the rhythms of your body. So our bodies run by a clock, and that clock, if you're female, you know exactly what that clock is. But cells run by a clock, and literally every 24 hours, your cells will cycle through a clock cycle. Now, what does this mean to you? Well, again, every organ in your body is made up of cells. All your skin is made up of cells. Your hair is made up of cells. Everything in you is made up of cells. And they all do this daily dance, this daily symphony that really lines up with the sun, okay? And so at certain times, your body is not real good at doing everything at once. It's not. So what it likes to do is focus on certain things at certain times. And we do this throughout the course of a day. So at certain times, we're building hormones. At certain times, we're rebuilding muscles and cellular structure. At certain times, we're building immune mediators. So this sort of goes through this dance every day for us. The most disruptive thing that we do every day is eat. Because when we eat, we interrupt this process that our bodies want to go through, daily. So we need to understand, better timing around when we eat and more intention about what we're putting inside of ourselves. We're a wonderful, beautiful, godly vehicle. And we're meant to run in a certain way, and literally almost everything in our society corrupts that. So, I think we're all beginning to realize that just on a personal level. But again, it all starts with a clock, and we need to understand this clock as we sort of look at human function and as we look at the endocannabinoid system. So, number one thing about how you work on a clock. All right. Under that, you have to have a system of regulation. So again, what happens when things change in the clock? So what happens when you eat? What happens when you walk over a lead mine or get exposed to radiation, or things get too hot or things get too cold? How does your body adjust to these changes? Well, you have something called the endocannabinoid system. And the endocannabinoid system is capable of disrupting this sort of circadian dance that we do every day, in managing within, whatever's going on, right? But again, eating is about the most disruptive thing we can do, other than here, hold this uranium particle, all right? So the endocannabinoid system, it helps us manage, again, around these changes. So in order to talk about it, we need to, again, drill into human function a little bit more, because if I ask you how you work, Jamie, how do you work? Jim, how do you work? You guys would give two completely different answers, as would I. So we understand our function in a very chaotic and confusing manner. So hopefully, as we go through this, I'm going to clear that up for you a little bit and give you a structure as to how to talk about yourself, or at least this system. So the way I like to talk about it is we all kind of understand how our cars work, right? We understand that there's a computer in the car, and that computer is always looking at kind of everything in the car. So it's looking at all the operational stuff. It's looking at, how close we are to the next car. It's looking at if we have water on our windshield. It's looking at all different kinds of things, but it's trying to balance that vehicle to perfect function and perfect balance within the, let's say, fuel constraints and environmental constraints that that vehicle has, right? So we all understand that. We can all describe that pretty well. So that's a pretty good way to look at how we work, because we are just kind of a sophisticated canister that, houses our soul, more than likely, if that's sort of your paradigm. But, even if it's not, we certainly work like a sophisticated vehicle. And I think we can all agree on that. Okay, so if we do work like a sophisticated vehicle, it's pretty important to understand what our engine is, right? So what is our engine? Well, in you don't have one engine, you've got a jillion of them. And literally you could have 1,000 little engines inside every cell, but they're called mitochondria. And, you probably remember from high school chemistry, or biology, that the mitochondria are the powerhouse of the cell, right? So they are what fuel us. They are what give us our fuel. They're our little engines, and it's super important to understand these guys and how they work. Arguably, these guys are also the source of our intelligence. Arguably, these guys are also the source of our spirituality. And what do I mean by that? Well, where do you hold your intelligence? Pick something, a brain. Okay, well, what's a brain? Well, it's just a collection of cells. Again, those cells only know what they are by the mitochondria inside of them. So these guys are super important to understand how they work, but certainly super important to understand what kind of fuels they run on. So mitochondria will run on 4 different types of fuels. Now, we're getting into cancer now, so start paying attention, okay? So I know you're like, well, Chip's supposed to be talking about the endocannabinoid system. He's talking about all this stuff. Where's he going? Background. So this is important. So mitochondria will run on 4 different types of fuels. So the least efficient fuel is something called glucose, and glucose is a 1 to 2 exercise. So 1 unit of glucose will build 2 units of fuel, which is called ATP. Fats are way more important, and that's really where I want to get you running right now. Certainly if you have cancer, fats are 20 times more efficient than running on glucose. So fats are a 1 to, it's variable, but at least 40, let's say, exercise, or at least, so 20x, right? So at least that. So fats are way, way more efficient. Now go back to what I just said about intelligence and spirituality and closeness to God, or however you want to look at it. Would you rather be really inefficient in that category or 20 times more efficient? Well, I think I'm going to go with the 20x one. I'll take 20x for 1,000, Dad. I would rather be there. So again, your third way that you can run a mitochondria is on light. So any guys out there think of yourselves as a light being? Well, guess what? You are, because your mitochondria will run on light. We don't really do this right now. It's more in the plant realm, but you are capable. The last way that you can run a mitochondria, and this is the way that mitochondria run in cancer, okay, is something called the Warburg effect, or anaerobic glycolysis. So in the presence of oxygen and fats, cells should run on fats. That's how they're most efficient, and they should run on fats. But in some instances, like cancer, even in the presence of fats and oxygen, the cells run on glucose. This is something called the Warburg effect, and it's super important to understand because it's kind of how cells proliferate. It's, not a kind of a normal thing or a natural thing. It's an aberration. And so, understanding it and why cells flip to it, super important, and super important in solving cancer. You can't solve cancer without understanding that little item. All right, so last concept, and we'll get into the endocannabinoid system. So fasting and fed, what is it? Well, as I said, again, eating is the most disruptive and costly thing that we can do to our bodies. Our bodies go through this dance every day, and we sort of want to do certain things at certain times. When that gets interrupted, it takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of work for you to deal with a meal, okay? So it takes 3 to 5 hours for your body to recover from a meal. Now, during this time, you flip. Everything in you sort of flips. Your immune system kind of goes to sleep when you eat. So, what does it cost you to eat and deal with nutrients? Your immune system. So, it kind of goes down, your shields go down, and it happens for 3 to 5 hours after we eat. Okay. You'll notice that to fully recover from a meal, and if you look down at kind of that hours 36 to 48, the fasting state, the second bullet says metabolic shift, fatty acids and ketones as fuel. Well, that's kind of where we want to be. It takes 36 hours for you to, let's say, recover from a meal, okay, and get to the state where we really want to be. Now, I know this is highly counterintuitive, but I want to get this in your thought process because this isn't how we've been trained at all. And what are the types of fats that we kind of need to eat? So again, these fats are super important because that's a fuel for mitochondria. And we want to optimize our bodies around running on these fats. So one of the ways to do it is we fast. There's other ways to do it. But if you look at kind of the types of fatty acids that we need to eat, there's saturated fat. We need to eat some of that, probably 30% of the fats that you eat. Trans fats are horrible. Try not to eat those. That's in cooking oil. That's at McDonald's. That's, most of what we have out there. Monounsaturated fats come from nuts. Again, they should be about 50% of our diet. Polyunsaturated about 20%, and those should be balanced omega-3 and omega-6. So polyunsaturated are essential. We've got to have them, but we need to balance omega-3 and omega-6. The world expert on this, a lady named Dr. Artemis Simopoulos, I had the ultimate privilege of talking to yesterday on the phone. Artemis is a friend and a very prolific researcher. We both agree on the just critical importance of educating you on the horrors of processed food, though. All right, so here we go. The endocannabinoid system, yeehaw. So now you guys kind of understand how you work, right? A little bit. So super important, these dietary fats, super important kind of to understand fasting and fed. Dietary fats is fuel for mitochondria, all that super important. Well, guess what? In your endocannabinoid system, the way that this works, the way that you sort of build, let's say, your initial endocannabinoid mediators, and the way that the endocannabinoid system understands about your diet and nutrition is really cool. So as you eat the different types of fats that you can stick on a triglyceride, I think there's 9 of them or something like that, each one of those will build a unique and individual endocannabinoid, okay? So if you eat DHA from fish, that's going to build a unique and special endocannabinoid. If you eat saturated fat, that builds anandamide, your main endocannabinoid. If you eat oleic acid from olive oil, that builds another endocannabinoid called oleomide. Literally every single type of fat that you can stick on a triglyceride will build a unique and individual endocannabinoid. In this way, your brain, your hypothalamus hippocampus, the computer in our vehicle, understands our nutritional intake. You need certain things to run. I mean, you need all different kinds of proteins and enzymes and all kinds of stuff to run, right? So how does your body know whether you're getting enough or the right things? Well, I'm telling you the way. By the dietary fats that you eat, the building of endocannabinoids, and an understanding of that by your hypothalamus hippocampus. If you're deficient in the fats or you're eating them in the wrong ratios, your endocannabinoid system will allow you to develop a gut biome. That gut biome, the purpose of that gut biome is to allow bacteria to produce useful proteins that offset what you're not getting in your diet. So there's this dance between what the dietary fats that we eat, the endocannabinoid system is understanding of that, and our development of a microbiome and how sophisticated that microbiome has to be to offset. Now, the endocannabinoid system is all about balance, right? So it has to basically be able to sense and understand our environment, sense and understand our nutrient intake, to understand where we are in the circadian clock during the day, and make changes to all that, which is a lot. It's, this is, again, manages your central nervous system. It manages calcium status in cells. It is the way that we sense our environment. So you sense your environment through something called TRP, transient receptor potential channel. And you can sense your environment, M8 is cold, V1 is hot. So there's a lot of different, ways, noxious fumes, all that, which is involved in cancer, by the way. So if I'm a cancer, I have to jump this system in order to survive. Otherwise, you'll kill me because you know that I'm there. Cellular growth is linked to this system. So again, all of the major actions of your body at a cellular level, but also at a higher level, the major actions of your vehicle. So you can think of the endocannabinoid system kind of like the sensor array in your car. So the thing that basically goes out and sends feedback to the brain, to the computer in the vehicle. And then you can also think of it as the mechanism of action. So if things need to change, if things need to be balanced, boop, the endocannabinoid system is going to be that mechanism of action. Now, to be a little bit more specific about this, you run your immune system by the endocannabinoid system. So this is a diagram showing stem cells, blood and immune stem cells, where they come from and how they kind of break apart. This is called differentiation. So if you look down at the bottom, erythrocytes are red blood cells, megakaryocytes are platelets. So again, all these come from the same place. Over on the right side, T cells and B cells are your immune cells, your killer cells. So all these come from the same place. You initiate this through endocannabinoid action. You differentiate these cells through endocannabinoid action. So again, a B cell only knows it's a B cell by the endocannabinoid action that it was performed on it. So super important, again, super duper important. All right, so now let's get into cancer real quick, and we'll tie this back into the endocannabinoid system. So cancer, we know how to kill cancer. Researchers know how to kill cancer. Your body has two ways to kill cancer. Something called autophagy and something called P53, which is a protein. Now, real quick on cancer, cancer is mutated cells, right? So, but there's more to it than that. And again, it takes about 4 mutations of a cell to form a cancer cell. Now, something interesting is, if it's all about cellular mutations, then, a mouse should have far less cancer than a whale, because a whale has way more cells, right? So just statistically, they're going to have more stuff to go wrong than a mouse would. And it turns out that doesn't work. A whale has less cancer than you and I do. A whale has less cancer than a mouse, because a whale or an elephant, they have like 20 genes that will express P53, and you have 1, and a mouse has 1, okay? So it's important that we understand how to push this P53 button inside of us. Well, the first thing that happens is when you eat, you shut off your 2 mechanisms to fight cancer, and you shut those off for 5 hours. So you have to go 5 hours without eating in order for this to even, your body to begin to fight cancer on its own. But you can use the endocannabinoid system to push those same mechanisms. So how do you push it, by behavior? Fast. How do you push it with, substances, supplements? Well, you hit the CB1 neuroreceptor. Okay, so what hits the CB1 neuroreceptor? Well, cannabis, THC hits CB1, and CB1 pushes AMPK, which pushes P53. Pretty important thing to push. So anything that affects AMPK or activates it is going to be helpful in fighting cancer, because that pushes P53. Anything that affects CB1, THC, other cannabidiol kind of affects, CB1 or can, so that would be helpful in a way. Fasting affects AMPK, antiparasitics. So things like you've heard about fenbendazole, menbendazole, ivermectin. So all of these guys work because they push the same button, AMPK, that you can push with fasting right there at home without anything on your own. All right, so the last thing I want to kind of tie up, and again, I feel like I'm tied on time, but I want to make sure that we're on time here, but this is super important. Again, your body has 2 different ways to kill cancer, okay? Something called P53, which is a protein, and something called autophagy. And what autophagy does is autophagy is like a little Pac-Man, and he'll go out and grab up cancer cells before they get to the point where they've mutated 4 times, okay? So again, when they get to the first mutation, your body has a way to clean that up. It's called autophagy. And that only gets it gets activated in other circumstances, but it mainly gets activated when you push AMPK. You can't push P53, which is the protein that actually kills cancer, without pushing AMPK. So the endocannabinoid system is super important in how you regulate your entire body. When you have an area of dysregulation, like a cancer, again, what's happened is something has happened, something has intervened there, and it's jumped certain things. So this endocannabinoid system can't really know about it, because if it did, it would deal with it. And your immune system can't really know about it, because if it did, it would deal with it. So the cancer has very unique ways to jump these systems, and it's, way deeper conversation than we need to have now, but, happy to go down that bunny trail with anyone that wants to go down it. But cancer has unique ways of jumping your immune system and your endocannabinoid system so that you leave it alone. And one of the ways that it jumps your endocannabinoid system is it overexpresses something called 2AG, which is your kind of CB2 ligand. And it looks kind of like a bruise to your body, or just an area that's under repair, which is kind of cool. All right, so let's stop there for a second and see if anybody has any questions. I'm going to be back to talk a lot more about diet at, I believe, 11 o'clock. So if you have questions about diet, you might hold those. I will stop sharing my screen, I think. Oh, no. Let's see. There we go. And we're still sharing, interestingly. There we go. Okay. Whoop. If anybody has any questions, then let me know. If you have questions, again, about diet, that would be better at 11. So we'll cover that in more detail at 11. Questions about the endocannabinoid system, far away. One thing you will notice is, do we talk about cannabis any? Not really, right? So cannabis is a way to affect this system. FECO is a really good way to affect this system. FECO is certainly a good way to affect this system as it, as to cancer. But there's a lot of other ways to affect the system. And again, this system is a system that's in your dog or your cat or your bird or your fish. And so, they have to have ways to affect and impact this system, obviously, that aren't cannabis.
Thank you so much for joining us, Chip. As always, you're a fantastic educator, and we're very thankful to have you on the team.